Corridors Part 10. Memories.
General Xander Davis eyed the pilot of the emissary as a long-range sensor suite, courtesy of Sakala Station steward Gredian, was being installed onto its dorsal armor. As the bolts clanged and attached the sensor suite to the outer hull, General Davis approached the pilot and tapped him on the shoulder.
"Do you know how to proceed on your search and rescue mission, Cadet?"
he asked sternly. The pilot shifted slightly under General Davis' stern stare.
Yes, sir. I'll be launching Pathfinder probes to specific locations that the Hermes is expected to travel through if they had used the automatic emergency recall directive on their ship.
General Davis watched as technicians loaded long-range Pathfinder probes onto the emissary. He nodded at the probes.
"And you know how to fire probes, right?"
Yes, sir. Dr. Jeremy Godwin has already finished the necessary calculations and has loaded the settings for the probes into the ship's computer. I just have to press the fire button.
He grinned, which withered when it wasn't reciprocated.
"There's a lot at stake here, Cadet,"
General Davis said seriously.
"Although the war front is very, very far away right now, these Forsaken aliens have already decimated an interstellar empire in about 30 years' time. Think about how fast they could wipe Earth out, and humanity along with it, if they managed to get through the Credith Dominion and the Onathins sovereignty."
I'm sorry, sir. I'm taking this seriously.
The pilot clarified.
"Good.
General Davis retrieved his tablet from his pocket.
Look at this,"
he said as he played the footage from the battle at Zedron, where Derek and Alan had almost effortlessly destroyed a Forsaken Vanguard fleet. The tablet flashed as the Hermes blinked in and around the Forsaken ships, who reeled about in confusion as they were torn to pieces by stabilizing corridors.
"I need all of our fighter pilots to be able to do that."
He gawked at the display.
Well, I'm more than happy to learn, but Pathfinder physics really isn't my forte. I don't think I'll ever be able to open corridors like that.
General Davis frowned.
"But you've had experience as a commercial pilot before. I know that you've personally opened corridors to Sichala and other star systems in the sovereignty space. Why do you need Dr. Godwin to preload calculations into the ship for you? How have you been opening corridors?"
Actually, sir, everything is preloaded. The calculations for opening corridors from Sol to Sakala, from Sakala to Exechid, and even the corridors within the Sol system are all preloaded into the ship's computers. Space traffic control tells me that it's to maximize the usage of the same path through space. So corridors will take less time to stabilize, but I think it's because almost no one can make the necessary calculation.
General Davis stared at the footage of Derek and Alan destroying another dreadnought. If this was true, losing Derek Yang would severely compromise humanity's ability to contribute to the war.
"Then you know how important it is that we find Dr. Yang alive. Good luck."
Thank you, sir.
The pilot saluted and entered the emissary along with a field medic. As General Davis watched the emissary disappear in a flash of light, he decided that he needed to talk to Dr. Jeremy Godwin again, to ask him if there was a way to automate the process of making Pathfinder probe calculations so that anyone could use them as the powerful weapons that Derek demonstrated them to be. The government building of the North American branch of Earth Council towered over English Bay in Vancouver. While there were floors and floors of administrative offices, there were also many labs populating the basements and sub-basements of the structure. At the main level, a large facility, originally meant for processing and receiving shipments, was converted into the Drinel acclamation facility. Construction crews had hastily carved 2 large pools in 2 large rooms. One of the rooms was connected to the building's water pump system and served as a purification chamber in which Drinel would purge their insides of foreign microorganisms. Following this, they would be led to the adjoining reintroduction chamber, where they would be exposed to the ocean water and its microorganisms. Any adverse responses to the oceanic microflora would be catalogued, and the Drinel affected would be treated. It was simple in its design, and what really made the acclamation facility were the hundreds of humans that volunteered to take care of the Drinel. Some were there because they had nothing else to do. Some were there for some kind of atonement for all the species that humanity had driven to extinction in the past. And some were there simply because they enjoyed helping others. Whatever the case, both Drinel and humanity worked together in excitement and joy, knowing that they are witnessing, and actively shaping, the rebirth of an interstellar civilization. 1 floor below, Dr. Tara Young passed her bioscanner over a Drinel as Tyler pushed in another aquarium-laden anti-gravity lift into her lab. She nodded her thanks to Tyler before refocusing on the Drinel.
So how are we feeling today? Do your scales feel better after the penicillin treatment?
Better. Gratitude.
Tara looked at the bioscanner readings and raised an eyebrow. Tyler walked over and furrowed his brow at the Drinel in the tank.
He's lying. He isn't feeling better at all.
I figured as much. Your scales are still showing roughly the same amount and extent of bacterial infection.
She rested her arm on the rim of the aquarium as she leaned over and stared down at the sick Drinel.
Look, I know you want to get out and explore the ocean, but I need you to be healthy first. Earth's oceans are far from tame, and if you don't get killed by the predators, you still have to fight off the microorganisms that live in the water.
The Drinel swam in circles.
Adapt.
Yes, healthy Drinel can adapt their biochemistry to work with oceanic microorganisms, but not unhealthy Drinel who've already been colonized and infected by pathogenic microorganisms.
She waved her bioscanner threateningly.
You can't lie to my bioscanner, and you can't fool Tyler either. Just be patient. We'll get you healthy and send you on your way soon enough.
Acknowledge.
The Drinel settled at the bottom of the tank, whiskers drooping. Tara sighed.
Well, we'll know more about how to beat this alien bacteria in about a day. I've got machines screening through all of our drugs right now to see which one kills it.
Tyler nodded.
That's great. But right now, they need you in the purification chamber. Seems there's some trouble with the younger Drinel. Apparently, they have developed the necessary anatomy to purge their insides like the adults can.
Should be an easy fix.
Tara hesitated for a second.
Have you heard anything yet?
Tara, the emissary just finished installing the long-range sensor suite from the Onathins, and are launching now. You also have to be a bit more patient.
Tyler placed his hand on Tara's shoulder.
Don't worry, we'll find him.
All right.
She took a deep breath.
Take me to the Drinel younglings.
Diplomat Pellin looked around at the giant indoor pool, noting hundreds of humans on the pool deck, tending to hundreds of Drinel in the water. The air was literally humming with happiness, excitement, and joy, as well as anxiety and trepidation. He watched as a pair of Drinel suddenly dashed through the water towards each other, creating thrashing waves in their wakes, before crashing into each other and intertwining their bodies. As they embraced each other with their wing fins, waves of relief and joy washed over the humans, as well as Diplomat Pellin. What are the odds? He thought. For two siblings to each survive the destruction of their civilization on different worlds, flee those worlds on different ships, seek refuge on different worlds when those ships gave out, and then be reunited again on yet another world? His beak clicked with amusement as the pair of Drinel siblings danced around each other in the water, creating frothing waves that lapped over the edge of the pool. As Diplomat Pellin walked along the wall of the large reintroduction chamber, he overheard the conversation between a Drinel and a human who was leaning over the edge of the pool.
This,
the human said as he brandished a syringe-like device,
is a micro-injector that has a microchip inside. I'm going to inject this microchip in you, just under the scales. Whenever you're in trouble out there in the ocean, all you have to do is tap it, and a group of humans known as the Coast Guard will come find you and bring you back here.
Acknowledgement. Gratitude.
Good.
the human technician said as he reached over and injected the microchip into the Drinel's hide.
Ok, you're all set. Have fun out there.
He waved towards an exit port, giving a human gatekeeper a thumbs up. Diplomat Pellin watched as the Drinel looked at the exit port, scales reflecting a deep forest green and eyes gleaming in excitement. It turned to leave, but hesitated. Propping itself up against the edge of the pool, it reached up and wrapped its whiskers gently around the human technician's arms and looked deep into his eyes for a brief second.
Thank you.
With that, the Drinel released the human, dropped back into the water, and dashed out of the exit port and into the ocean. Several other Drinel also dashed out in much the same manner.
Diplomat Pellin, I didn't expect to see you here.
Ambassador Evans said as he and Tara walked out of the purification chamber and towards the Onathin diplomat.
Never before have so many Drinel been gathered in one place.
Diplomat Pellin nodded to the Drinel in the pool.
And never before have any of them experienced such happiness and joy since the destruction of their civilization. You humans have given them something that none of them believed was possible. A new home, as well as a reason to live again. It is a marvelous sight.
He preened his wings.
Well, I hope you bring your thoughts and feelings back to the first prelate and the Onathin sovereignty. We sure could use all the help we can get with carting the Drinel refugees back to Earth.
Ambassador Evans suggested.
It may be due to the Drinel's infectious happiness, but you can rest assured that I will be making a recommendation to establish a government-sponsored program to relocate the Drinel to Earth, despite the austerity measures imposed by the war.
Diplomat Pellin stated as he started to preen his other wing. Tara looked at him carefully.
Diplomat Pellin, have you ever heard of a vacuum cleaner?
The Onathin paused in his preening and cocked his head in curiosity.
No, I have not. What is this cleaner of vacuums?
Tara smiled. Tyler noticed that it wasn't her usual playful smile that she usually uses around Derek.
Well, why don't I just show you? We have one around here somewhere.
She procured a small portable nano-bristle-enhanced cyclone model from the nearest supply locker and flourished it in front of Diplomat Pellin.
Some ideas will never be obsolete. Now, open your wing, please.
The Onathin complied, and Tara powered on the vacuum cleaner, set it to low power, and brushed its bristles against the feathers of the Onathin. Diplomat Pellin chirped in pleasure as the nanofibers massaged into the primary feathers of his multicolored underwing, gently brushing away loose feathers and accumulated dust particles. As Tara moved the vacuum cleaner to his other wing, Diplomat Pellin marveled at the device.
This machine, this vacuum cleaner, can certainly find a large market in the Onathin sovereignty. Perhaps a trade agreement is in order?
Tyler smirked.
I think something can be arranged.
There we go, all done.
Tara said as she switched off the vacuum cleaner. The Onathin flapped his wings briefly, chirping his pleasure and gratitude. He was interrupted by an insistent beeping from the thin belt he wore around his waist.
Excuse me. The first prelate requests a meeting.
He eyed the vacuum cleaner again.
I certainly have things to discuss with him.
Diplomat Pellin left, leaving Tyler and Tara standing with a vacuum cleaner awkwardly. Tara started to remove the waste storage bag of the vacuum cleaner and place the small bag inside of another plastic bag that she procured from her pocket.
You're saving that? What for?
Tyler asked incredulously.
Nothing yet.
Tara said mysteriously. Tyler was about to ask for clarification when a large, older-looking Drinel approached them.
Ambassador Tyler Evans, I would like to again express my gratitude for the chance to rekindle our civilization in the oceans of your homeworld.
Not a problem. We're happy to help.
Tyler waved to the humans in the reintroduction chamber.
Most of these technicians and workers are actually volunteers.
Words and thoughts cannot express the full extent of our appreciation for humanity's gift. The enemy has taken much from us. I understand that humanity has also decided to fight against the enemy and repel their invasion towards the galactic center.
Yes, we intend to fight the Forsaken and stop them from doing the same thing to the Credith and the Onathins.
Ambassador Evans stated.
Humanity is noble indeed. However, you are only one world, taking up arms against a vast interstellar force.
Admittedly, the odds are not in our favor, but I have no doubt that in the end, human ingenuity will prevail with our allies' support, of course. We'll think of something.
Ambassador Evans winked at the Drinel elder, an action that was not reciprocated, but understood.
Even so, it is always wise to couple ingenuity with wisdom acquired from past experiences.
The Drinel flicked its whisker towards the window, gesturing to the mountains that were visible through them.
Much as you have done with your space elevator.
What are you saying?
All Drinel ships carry a cache of information that is populated with memories from its journeys throughout the cosmos. I have no doubt that some of this information could be useful for the coming battles. Please take the ship and the memories it contains in its core as a small token of gratitude from the Drinel.
Well, we've already drained the water out and have taken a look inside. There's a small chance that we walked right by the memory cache without knowing what it was. since we weren't able to activate anything. What does it look like? And how do we turn it on?
Tyler asked.
I will show you.
The Drinel said as it wriggled closer and stared into Tyler's eyes. Tyler shuddered slightly from shock as images of the Drinel ship interior flashed into his mind. Large, sweeping arches supported the ceiling, all extending from a central cerulean orb that glowed within a transparent meter-long capsule. A low tone started ringing in his head, slowly shaking him out of the Drinel's projected images. He straightened his body.
Thank you. I know what to do.
The Drinel ship was tethered to the tarmac of the Vancouver spaceport by interwoven nanofiber ropes. It hovered just above the ground, gently swaying with the wind. Jeremy nodded to a truck driver, who climbed into a massive hauler and drove towards the spaceport's incinerator with a giant tank filled with water from the Drinel ship. He studied the spacecraft again, trying to place himself into the mind of the Drinel engineers who had built this ship. It really does look sort of like a manta ray, he thought as he walked along one of the upturned, outstretched wings, noting the ribbed glass windows in the underside of the wings. There were 2 entry ports to the ship, a 3-meter by 2-meter rectangular opening on the dorsal side of the ship, and another similar port on the rear of the ship, between the 2 elongated engine tails. There were no retractable walls as far as Jeremy could tell, which meant that either the Drinel had to add the water into their ships through the relatively small entry ports, or that they simply built their ships underwater. What he couldn't figure out, however, was whether the protrusions that stuck out on the dorsal side of the wings were weapons or some other ship system. He still couldn't turn on any of the systems inside the ship either. Jeremy sighed. Why couldn't they have gotten an engineer to assess the ship? I wish Derek was here. Tara and Tyler's approaching footsteps caught his attention.
Hey, how are things going in the Drinel acclamation facility?
Things are actually moving very quickly. General Davis managed to convince Earth Council to assign a lot of Council scientists and volunteers to work with the Drinel.
Tara said with a hint of surprise in her voice.
I don't think I'm even needed anymore. I can probably move on to some other projects.
Tyler looked at her a little suspiciously, but decided not to push the matter. After spending more than 2 months with her on the original prototype vessel on their trip to the Onathin homeworld, he trusted her enough to let her have her secrets. He ignored his ambassadorial instincts to get to the bottom of someone's true motives, and instead addressed Jeremy.
A Drinel elder has shown me how to access their ship's memory core. I think it's sort of like a black box. It'll be interesting to see a small snippet of their war with the Forsaken, and it might give the General some clue as to how the Forsaken will react to our offensive and defensive maneuvers.
Oh, that sounds good. This way.
Jeremy answered as he walked them up a ramp into the rear entry port.
What are we looking for?
It's hard to describe. I'll know it when I see it,
Tyler said as he began meandering through the halls and corridors of the Drinel ship. The interior of the Drinel ship was mostly open space, presumably to allow adequate water flow, as well as to accommodate Drinel movement. Large, sweeping arches and ribbing stretched across the ceilings and reached down onto the floor of the spacecraft. Blue lights dotted the arches, glowing softly and spraying cerulean light across the walls and floors. The wide corridor that they were walking in eventually opened up to a large room that featured a tubular meter-long capsule that jutted out from the floor. A glowing orb was nestled inside, pulsating blue energy across the sweeping arches that radiated from the capsule.
That's it, right there.
Tyler gestured to the orb as he turned to face Jeremy.
Do you have a frequency generator on your tablet?
Yeah.
Jeremy fiddled around with his tablet.
What frequency do you want?
I don't know the exact number. Just start with something low.
Tyler replied, turning his gaze back towards the pulsating orb. He frowned a little as he tried to remember what the tone in his head sounded like.
No, that's too low. A little higher.
They stared at the orb. It pulsated back at them innocently.
A little bit higher. You're almost there.
He squinted into the orb and could almost make out vague shapes swimming inside.
Yeah, that's the right frequency there.
Jeremy looked down at his tablet in surprise.
Oh, there's some sort of sympathetic feedback coming from the orb now.
That's not important right now. Look at the orb,
Tyler said as he walked closer to the orb. The vague shapes inside the sphere expanded around Tyler as they resolved into hundreds of Drinel ships, leaving the orbit of an oceanic world. He looked around at the ships and noticed that they seemed to be of every size and shape. Although he couldn't see them, he felt millions and millions of Drinel swimming within the fleet. A thought rang in his head.
The exodus of Odredin 3.
Blue ripples of light emanated from all of the ships in the Exodus fleet as they fled the system. Smaller ships raced past lumbering larger ships, at times almost crashing into each other in their bid to leave the system. Tyler suddenly noticed the low-frequency tones that had been pulsing urgently in his head to be an alarm, and immediately knew that this meant Forsaken ships had entered the system. Through the ribbed windows, he saw hundreds of Forsaken dreadnoughts and their Void Blade escorts drop into normal space around the planet, their ships and weapons arrays turning to bear on the Exodus fleet. The few defense satellites orbiting the planet sprang to life, swinging their metallic, tubular bodies toward the Forsaken ships. Gyros spun within the tubes, building up speed and momentum before launching a projectile that streaked into the Forsaken fleet and exploded in a dizzying splash of blue light. Shockwaves rippled throughout the Forsaken dreadnoughts, disintegrating their hulls and tearing the Void Blades asunder with blue fury. As the black ships were painted purple with the light of their exploding compatriots, the oceans of Odredin 3 roiled and churned, seeming to open up columns of air that reached down to the depths of the ocean. Through these air tunnels, more explosive projectiles streaked from the surface and into space, detonating within the Forsaken fleet. Hundreds more Forsaken ships poured into orbit around the planet and fired upon the defense satellites as well as the planet. Light rippled from the satellites as the plasma pulses collided with their energy shields, casting dancing shadows upon the clouds of the planet below. Swells and tsunamis echoed across the planetary ocean as the Forsaken weapons fire detonated underwater. The satellites fired again, destroying dozens more enemy ships before succumbing to the overwhelming firepower of the Forsaken dreadnoughts. Tyler winced as the defense satellites exploded. He felt a renewed sense of urgency and felt himself moving through the Drinel ship. He projected a thought to the thousands of Drinel that had suddenly come into focus all around him.
Activate shields. We cannot wait for any more evacuees. We must leave now.
Tyler looked behind him and realized that a shuttle had offloaded additional Drinel onto the ship before undocking and flying back toward the planet. A frustrated voice rang out through the water-filled ship.
We cannot abandon our brethren on the planet. They will be slaughtered by the enemy. And so shall we if we remain any longer. The orbital defenses have been breached, and the enemy has already begun bombarding the planet. We cannot do any more here.
The ship began to accelerate forward, zipping past larger ships as it dashed out of the gravity well of Odredin 3. A shudder echoed through the water as a void blade suddenly rounded the planet's horizon and shot its beams at the vessel.
Divert all power to the shields and engines. We must outrun the enemy cruiser.
Tyler projected. Behind him, flashes of light peppered the night sky of Odredin 3 as some of the larger evacuation ships were pelted with weapons fire from hundreds of Forsaken dreadnoughts and destroyed. Tens of thousands of Drinel were suddenly silent, their writhing bodies slowing as they froze and shattered in the void of space. The main bulk of the dreadnought fleet had chosen to chase the Exodus fleet, leaving a small portion to bombard the planet. Tyler's ship rolled past the Void Blade, its shields shrugging off the laser fire and casting its energy aside. Ahead, the other smaller Drinel ships had left the gravity well of the planet and engaged their interstellar engines, leaving faint blue trails of light behind them as they raced into the void. The larger ships behind them had finally gained enough momentum to begin to catch up with the smaller ships, but many of them had already been destroyed by the pursuing Forsaken forces.
Gravity well cleared.
A thought echoed through the water.
Engaging interstellar engines.
Blue lines streaked alongside the ribbed windows of the Drinel ship as it raced out of the Odredin system towards a distant star. Waves of relief and remorse washed through Tyler as they left a world to be murdered behind them. He sensed that about a tenth of the larger ships had escaped the Forsaken and were also on their way out of the system. The rest of the ships were mere husks wallowing in the void, splintering and crashing into each other. Drinel bodies floated silently amongst the frozen water globules in the harsh vacuum, an image reflected by the floating bodies in the ocean planet below. So few ships survived. An urgent, rapid tone bounced through the ship.
Forsaken ships, traveling along an unexpected trajectory.
Unexpected? Where did they come from? Tyler heard himself asking.
The approach vector does not seem to have an origin star. Could they have been waiting for us in the void?
The ship shook violently as a void blade merged its superposition field with the Drinel ship and forced it back into normal space. The water rushed forward, nearly cracking the windows with its unexpected pressure. Tyler's vision blurred for a second, before refocusing on hundreds of void blades that hung in the empty void, waiting to catch any evacuees. His insides recoiled with fear and revulsion as he recognized the wreckage all around them had come from Drinel ships. Chunks of ice collided with the hull, sending foreboding rattles echoing throughout the water. The void blades turned and fired.
Brace for impact!
The purple lasers lashed out and were cast aside by the Drinel shields. More void blades started to maneuver closer to the ship to acquire a targeting solution, while others moved to intercept the larger evacuation ships, forcing them into normal space. Dozens of laser beams burned across the Drinel shields, their electricity arcing and dancing across the ships as the destructive energy sought a way past the barrier. A single trail of blue light beamed itself into the killing grounds, revealing a massive Drinel warship that immediately fired upon the void blades. Its huge back-swept wings burned angrily as its gunports spat explosive charges into the Forsaken fleet, disintegrating dozens of void blades with each charge. Wave after wave of explosive charges washed through the void blade fleet, its tides of light shattering the dark crescent-shaped hulls. The Drinel warship plowed directly into the void blades, its shields scattering laser light aside as the void blades returned fire. Blue shockwaves of light emanated from one of its dorsal humps and intersected with nearby void blade ships, crumpling their hull and detonating their laser turrets. Within a few minutes of its arrival, the powerful Drinel warship had destroyed most of the void blade fleet, and the remaining Forsaken ships seemed to be retreating. A message echoed through the water.
More Forsaken ships are incoming. Initiate your interstellar engines now while there is still time.
The Drinel warship turned on the void blade stragglers and eliminated them with explosive fury. Tyler could see large writing on its hull, and somehow understood it to say Darendin. Facts popped into his head, informing him that the Darendin was the sole surviving ship from the Odraden defense fleet. Around him, the larger evacuation ships started to engage their interstellar engines, but not before hundreds of dreadnoughts suddenly appeared behind them.
Go now! The Darendin will engage the enemy!
The Drinel warship maneuvered itself between the pursuing Forsaken ships and the remnants of the Exodus fleet.
We failed to stop them at Odraden. Let this be our atonement.
It fired its charges into the Forsaken fleet, slowing their advance and destroying a couple of dreadnoughts. A tremor rippled the water as the ship engaged its interstellar engines and headed off toward the evacuation point. Tyler looked behind them, watching as the lone Drinel warship, the Darendin, defiantly stared into the maw of hundreds of enemy capital ships. The Darendin fired charge after charge, each volley destroying dozens of dreadnoughts. It flashed and blinked as the dreadnought plasma pulses collided and diffused along the Drinel shields. Purple flares blazed dimly in the distance as dreadnoughts flashed out of existence. But it wouldn't be enough. Tyler walked to the window, staring at the distant flashes with a mixture of sorrow and pride. After an impressively long period of time, a brilliant blue explosion echoed back across the void and into the ship, saturating Tyler's vision. He blinked. The light receded and revealed an immaculate ceiling, periodically decorated with panels of softly glowing white light.
Welcome back.
Tara's face swam into view as Tyler's eyes finally refocused.
Wait, why did you turn it off? It was only at the beginning of their journey.
Tyler realized he was lying in the infirmary of the North American governmental building of the Earth Council.
We had to turn it off.
Tara replied.
You were having a seizure after that thing had been on for only a minute.
Only a minute?
Tyler tried to sit up, but suddenly stopped when his muscles protested. He groaned.
It felt like at least an hour.
If it makes you feel better, you've been unconscious for about a day. You gave us quite a scare with that seizure.
Tara examined some data on her tablet.
But it seems like there was no permanent damage to your brain.
She dropped her arms and sat down beside his bed.
So did you see anything that might help us fight the Forsaken?
I was out for a day, and none of you saw anything.
Tara shook her head.
No. Jeremy noticed some infrasonic sympathetic vibrations coming from the data cache orb when we activated it with our own frequency generator. He says that the waveforms look similar to the ones that he always picks up around the Drinel.
She looked at Tyler with concern.
Normally, these infrasonic vibrations only minimally affect human brains. But in your case, it induces auditory and visual hallucinations.
But it wasn't a hallucination. It was real. It felt real.
Tyler sighed and sunk further into his pillow.
Well, you definitely thought it was real. Your whole body was reacting to it.
She put her tablet away.
But don't worry, in this case, it is real. This is how the Drinel communicate with each other, and with you. So, tell me what you saw.
Tyler sighed again and closed his eyes, remembering the images, as well as the pain and anguish of the Drinel as they tried to flee the Forsaken.
I saw a massacre. So many dead Drinel.
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm pissed off.
Tyler said quietly.
The Forsaken were waiting in the void between stars to intercept and kill any fleeing refugees. They weren't just invading the Drinel, they were exterminating them. There won't be any reasoning with them. They are monsters, through and through.
Tara silently stared at the bedsheets, eyes glazed over as she wondered if Derek had suffered the same fate at the hands of the Forsaken. Shouldn't they have found him by now? What am I going to do if they find him dead? She took a deep breath and realized that Tyler was watching her.
Hey, Derek will be okay. We both know how smart he is. He must have figured out a way to escape the Forsaken.
Tyler suddenly remembered something from his vision that caused him to grin stupidly. Tara nodded.
Thanks for that.
She stood up to resume her duties.
Anything else I can get you before I leave?
Yeah, I want to talk to Jeremy. He's going to want to take a look at the shield technology aboard that Drinel ship.
Tyler remarked, eyes alight with excitement. Tara found Jeremy and left him with Tyler. The two men were jabbering on excitedly about the Drinel shield technology that supposedly was still functional on the Drinel refugee ship. She took a deep breath as she entered her lab, casting an appraising look at the group of infected Drinel that had coiled themselves at the bottom of their holding tank. They seemed to be resting. She collapsed on a chair and sighed. Between Tyler's seizure and Derek's disappearance, she hadn't been getting very much sleep. Her arms moved autonomously as they took the plastic bag, containing the vacuum cleaner contents, and placed it next to the microscopic imager. Tara had surreptitiously placed a new vacuum bag into the vacuum cleaner just prior to cleaning Diplomat Pellin's feathers, so there shouldn't be any background junk that would obscure what she was looking for. So tired. Tara stared at her quietly humming lab. Bench tops were neatly organized with bottles of reagents, automatic pipettes, and various instruments and centrifuges. The washed beakers and flasks innocently twinkled back at her. Her eyes fell upon a section of Drinel hide that lay in repose in the corner of the room. "Oh, Derek, where are you?" Her chest felt tight, as if her heart was going to burst out of her body with worry. What if they never find him? What if he's gone forever? She walked over to the glittering Drinel hide and let the scales dazzle her eyes. We were going to work on this together. Her fingers traced over the scales as she recalled the last conversation she had with Derek in this lab. He had dried the hide and flourished it several times in front of her to demonstrate how light it was.
"Look at it. Isn't it awesome?"
It's a piece of Drinel skin,
she said, lips curling into a smile as Derek examined the hide with childlike wonder.
"It's more than that."
Derek morphed his Omni-tool into a hammer and abruptly bashed it into the Drinel skin. The scales shimmered as they reacted to the force of the hammer, rearranging themselves to best distribute it evenly throughout the hide.
"Look at that. This bottle of water was on this table with the skin, and it didn't even ripple when I hit it with the hammer."
That's great and all, but we already have adaptive polymers that can pretty much do the same thing.
"Yes, but only within certain ranges of forces. And we also have to use different materials for different types of forces, like blunt trauma or puncture forces. This thing can instantly adapt to any amount of force exerted on it."
Derek looked up at Tara.
"It can adapt on the nanometer scale."
You're just guessing. You can't know that for sure.
Tara replied as she walked closer to the Drinel hide.
"Yep, that's why I'm going to need your help. I can find out what it's made of and the manner in which the scales arrange themselves."
Derek put his hand on Tara's.
But I think it uses some sort of biological mechanism to perform the real-time force adaptation. I'll need your help for that.
A joint project, just like old times.
Tara said as she looked deeply into Derek's eyes.
Just like old times.
Derek's eyes reflected his excitement.
If we can nail down how all this happens, think of the applications.
Like what?
Like adaptive armored exoskeletons. Power armor.
Tara traced her fingers along the Drinel scales wistfully. Even if they didn't find Derek, she decided that she would work on the project without him and achieve the goal that Derek had envisioned for him. A beep caused her to take out her tablet. High-throughput screening protocols have been completed on 1,098,437,352 compounds. 49,345 compounds found to be effective at inhibiting bacterial growth. Good. Lots of drugs to choose from. She looked at the resting Drinel and smiled. They should be fixed up in no time. A second beep caused her to look down again. Her heart leaped at the message displayed across the tablet. Hermes has been found. Survivors en route, ETA 15 hours. Prep infirmary for surgery.